Good afternoon, everyone that's watching. Today, we are going to be talking about question 4 and continuing that conversation as part of our Inside the Industry series. We're joined today by Tracy Lancaster, Executive Vice President and one of the founding members of Peake ReLeaf, as well as Losia Nyankale, who is just incredible. Let's get that out of the way. Who's involved with a myriad of things, Cannaration, Grow with Lisa, as well as being the executive director of the Maryland Chapter of NORML. So again, I wanted to thank Losia for her time today, thank Tracy for her time today, and I wanted to introduce Losia to our patient community, to those who may not be familiar with her, or you may have seen Cannarations at Peake ReLeaf and just wanted to know where those things came from and why they're just so amazing. So just to introduce Losia, she is a successful home grower and educator through her small business, Grow with Lisa. She frequently sponsors small business oriented trade shows that help aspiring independent operators find professional resources. For the past few years, she's been a leading voice and advocate for small business friendly public policy. In 2019, she agreed to serve as the Maryland NORML Chapter Deputy Director, and then moving on to become the Executive Director of that same chapter. She's worked tirelessly in committing to community-led public policy conversations, laws that address the needs of those most harmed by prohibition, and has really been at the forefront of ensuring that the needs and concerns of our patient community are met and the questions that they have are answered in a way that's satisfactory to them. So thank you so much, Losia, for joining us today and again, sharing your time with us and talking about why this is so important.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that amazing intro or breakdown of what I do. Very well put. And hi, Tracy. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's very nice to have you. And I would just like to build upon what Kevin said, just personally and professionally. You know, Losia, we've known each other for several years now. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over these years. We met through advocacy and cannabis networking, and we've been carrying some of your products from Cannarations at Peake ReLeaf for a while now. And that's how our relationship started after meeting through advocacy and networking, and was really excited to see you take over the leadership at Maryland NORML, and what you've been doing is amazing over there. So thank you very much for your service in doing that. Volunteer gigs like that are not easy. You know, they're labor of love, and you're doing great at it. And we appreciate the work that you're putting into it. So I guess with that, could you, before we jump into some things that are specifically about, the legalization efforts, you want to tell us a little bit about your businesses, Grow with Lisa and Cannarations?
Sure. So my Grow with Lisa brand started just from my desire to want to participate in the home grow laws. I was recognized by Vice Land Redicate as a resident of DC, taking part in those grow laws. And that just kind of had a trickle effect that landed me in this wonderful space that we call the cannabis industry. I started doing events around home grow. And as a new grower, I was looking for somebody to try to help guide me on what's the proper ways to grow. And, finding that was a challenge. Once I did locate a group of people that were a little bit more experienced than I was and were willing to teach others, I started to host the trade shows where I would connect the growers with the grow consultants. And from that, trying to expand out into different areas and running into the wall of the legalization not catching up to the rest of America, and also the stigma that has impacted communities so often. So that's why I created Cannaration, which is a homegrown creation designed to help spark the conversation around homegrown legalization. I use real leaves from my home grow to decorate glassware, rolling trays, pretty much anything I could get a leaf on, I do. We also do weddings and special cannabis events like brunches and dinners. And they're also available at Peake ReLeaf. So thank you very much, Tracy, for being that wonderful support for a small business like mine. And yeah, that's how those two got started. And I'm really looking forward to growing and spreading the message around the importance of including home grow legalization in your cannabis laws.
We really appreciate you sharing just everything that you've been involved in, the journey from then to now, how that's changed over the years, how that's evolved over the years, how that's coincided with some of the things that's happening both in our community and in the industry. So in keeping with that, we can just begin talking about question 4, its importance and its relevance for our community. So, why do you think it's so important to get out and vote yes on question 4 and legalize adult use? Why now is it so pivotal?
Well, it's pivotal now because it's a little overdue. You had DC who legalized in 2015. Virginia is also a recreational state. So if we're talking about just trying to keeping up with the tri-state area in itself, we're behind. So make the decisions ourselves rather than leaving it up to the lawmakers, which have taken years to even allow it to get to this point, is very pivotal. It's not common for Maryland voters to have the opportunity to either create new laws or create new policy. So by allowing us that opportunity, I think it's something that we really need to take advantage of.
And Tracy, I'll throw that question over to you in terms of some of the things that you're seeing both in the industry and the community, and why it's important now more than ever for us to get out there and vote yes on question 4.
I mean, I would say question 4, to reiterate what you have heard in some of these other inside the industries, it's really about criminalization, and it's long overdue. We know that prohibition doesn't work. Prohibition has never worked. Black and brown communities are the ones who have been disproportionately affected by the criminalization of cannabis. Even with decriminalization, they still are the most affected communities. Criminal records follow people for their whole lives and affect access to jobs, housing, even the ability to vote. In the quick summary, I would say that's why it's important now. It's long overdue. And I think that kind of leads into a question for Losia. Could you tell us a little bit about how legalization will affect the criminal justice system?
Well, with legalization, I think one of the major components of House Bill 837, which is the companion bill to question 4, that automatically comes into effect once voters have successfully voted yes on that one. The home grow that is included in that law is something that I feel is really important in terms of legalizing access to the plant. I feel like we are privileged to definitely have a wonderful medical program here in the state of Maryland. And then adding a recreational market to that is also amazing to then give people even more access. But I believe the safest access includes home grow and not being then penalized for trying to have access to your medication through the method that you choose on deciding is probably one of the biggest things that Option 4 presents in terms of decriminalization. And also, there are a few changes when it comes to possession that I wouldn't say really changes things on that level, on the level of talking about crimes and decriminalization, because we're still locking people up for something that they can go to a store and purchase. So I feel like once we really address those penalties associated with simple possession and just kind of eliminate those, like you never get pulled over for having too many beers. So getting pulled over and being discovered that you have too much weed is not really fair, and it doesn't reflect the cannabis trends that are going on right now in terms of the normal everyday resident or citizen choosing to partake or just accepting that it's legal.
You really brought up something important about the bridge between home grow and adult use and personal patient responsibilities and rights. And I know that's something that you're passionate about is home grow. Why for you has home grow become as important I don't want to say issue, but important factor for you? And what would you stress for our cannabis community, our patient community that have questions about home grow, or what would you even stress to companies that are a little hesitant about home grow? Like what would you communicate to them about its importance?
I am an advocate for home grow because home grow is the safest form of access to cannabis for patients. Being able to know what you're growing and understand what and how you're consuming it is really important, and the best ways to really come down with a perfect treatment plan for the patients that use cannabis. When it comes to patients trying to gain access to information, about home grow, always reach out to your advocacy groups first. They are people that are very knowledgeable about this market, whether it be in Maryland, in DC, Virginia, or any other places that have legal cannabis. We're all kind of connected in this ecosystem. So we can connect you guys with people that do have knowledge and information about the growing process. I know Maryland, as we look forward to passing question 4, once we do cross that hurdle, we will definitely be hosting information classes about ways that you can access genetics to grow, and also connecting you with some consultants that can help you through that growing process. And for those that are part of this industry currently that oppose home grow, I encourage those people to learn more about the plant. Most of the times when people speak negatively on home grow, it's based off of information that they have read. Most of this information comes from either lobbyists or people that are not for consumers, for consumer protections, or for consumers having the right to make a choice. So full access, full legalization is including home grow. And if you want to properly advocate for that, let's make sure that you have either firsthand experience or knowledge about what that grow process entails, so that even if we are saying, okay, well, we don't want home grow, why do we not want it? What is the reason that we don't want it that actually is impacting either your community or your business? I think that during one of the council meetings for the work group meeting, for cannabis, prior to House Bill 1 passing and now becoming question 4, Delegate Moon had brought up a point about home grow to the work group and about its impact on the actual market. And the response from the MMCC head was that it's only 10% of the actual population that take advantage of home grow laws, legal home grow laws. So that 10% is not a big enough number to have a drastic impact on the current market or even that recreational market. And it's not the consumer's responsibility to drive the market. This market was, fortunately, it was created so patients can have access, but it shouldn't also include limitations that only benefit the people that have businesses within the space. Let people grow, understand the importance of it, but most importantly, understand the process that people have to go through, so that when you do speak on home grow, that you're speaking from a point of fact and experience rather than false propaganda that you've been reading, which happens a lot in this industry. You'd be surprised about the amount of articles that you see from experts that doesn't add up. And it's clear from somebody who has had the experience of growing that this person has never grown a plant in their life. The 2 plant count that Maryland has right now is insufficient. And that's based off of information, false information that, your average plant is going to yield 6 ounces, and 6 ounces, 12 ounces for a patient per year is enough. And it's
You bring up a really, really fantastic point about misinformation and how that could potentially guide a patient's perception of the market and the cannabis community, or a company's perception of the market or the community. What are some of the things, and could be for Tracy, Losia, whoever kind of wants to throw their answer in, what kinds of misinformation should our patient community be on the lookout for so that they know it's something that isn't true, just to kind of guard themselves as they go to vote? Because we know that misinformation can very easily guide the process of elections, for legislation, for anything else. We've seen that to varying degrees all across the country. But what are some of the things our patient community should be looking out for when it comes to misinformation that could potentially impact if they should vote or what they vote towards? And I'll say really quick that one of the assumptions that we even talked with Delegate Moon about before is the assumption that everybody is going to vote, or that I don't need to vote because it'll definitely pass. That's misinformation. That's a very gross assumption about what you think is going to happen based on, you think because it's a popular idea, that it's just a given that it's going to pass or that it's going to be present in future legislation. So that's one thing that I would offer in terms of misinformation, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I think one of the biggest understands or things with question 4 is the misinformation about adult use legalization. Once it's legalized, I can start my legacy business, or I'm completely protected under the laws by and carry around cannabis or consume cannabis wherever I feel like. I feel like a lot of people need to understand that question 4 is associated with House Bill 837. And when we read that House Bill 837, it is on the Maryland General Assembly website. It will break down to you guys what is actually allowed with question 4 and what the penalties associated with violating some of those laws that are under question 4. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions across the industry is that home growers are also part of the illicit legacy market that want to continue that even in a legal space. Home grow is for personal use and for personal consumption only. If we want to talk about it, we want to use the correct language. We want to talk about craft cultivation, or we want to talk about micro grows, where then the average home grower would then take the process into being a legal business and then going through the regulations to set up their grow to then be able to provide to wonderful people like Peake ReLeaf and other great dispensaries in Maryland. But that in itself is a whole different process, a whole different step. So when we do talk about home grow, focus on the fact that it's for personal use and personal grow. I feel like those were like the major things that we're hearing when it comes to adult use. Oh, and also like the dispensaries don't automatically just start selling you weed. It is a process. It is something that takes time. The passing of it does come with a waiting period, and things don't come into effect as far as the decriminalization and your possession limits and the home grow until July of 2023. And then they're looking at opening the actual stores between 2024 and 2025. It's a process still. It's nothing that automatically starts right away. So understand that there's patience that needs to be involved with this process, and they're still working things out in order to get you guys your cannabis on a recreational level.
And since you brought it up, Losia, could you tell us a little bit about when those legal sales begin from, commercially available cannabis from, dispensaries or however that looks? Could you tell us a little bit about what you think some of those scenarios might look like?
Sure. Well, the Cannabis Work Group is actually going to be coming out with something, I think, before the end of the year, if not in January, about how they want to establishing their licensing. So that's not very clear. The timeline, though, essentially is typically 2 years after the passing of recreational is when they typically are opening application process and issuing licensing, and then the rollout of the opening of the stores. Now, Tracy, as you know, that timeline doesn't always stick. Sometimes there can be delays in the process, whether that be on the legal side or from getting your business up to code and standard. That may take that time, but it's definitely nothing that happens automatically or right away.
So, we talked about what we want to stress to the patient community when it comes to misinformation, things to keep in mind. We've discussed the different scenarios, maybe possible timelines that we foresee happening if question 4, everyone votes yes on it, and what the consequences of that are going to be. What are some of the things that you'd like to see cannabis organizations, not companies specifically, but maybe like patient centered organizations, in terms of how they communicate the importance of question 4 to the patient community? Because we talked about what we do in terms of cannabis businesses or C associations, but what are some of the other types of things that you'd like some of these organizations to communicate to our patient community?
I think the things that we want to communicate about question 4 is the impacts that we will have on the community. A lot of people have that misconception that cannabis legalizations is just about cannabis users, but it is not. Cannabis legalization impacts entire communities, from the user all the way down to somebody who has never even seen or smelled cannabis before. So when we are going to the polls and we are considering question 4, let's also consider our friends, our neighbors, how much this growing industry can have a great financial impact on the things that we need and want in our community. The Cannabis Reinvestment Act is a part of House Bill 837, which will come into effect once question 4 is legalized. And that right there is, I feel like, a driving force to would want anybody to legalize cannabis because of the financial impacts that it could have on the positive financial impacts that it could have on communities. And also, I feel that question 4 greatly addresses our returning citizens with the automatic expungement clause that's in there. You do want to read the fine print. I'm not an attorney, so I cannot advise you more on that, but you would want to read the fine print, understanding how you can get your records cleared. Because as Tracy mentioned before, that record will follow you, that record will haunt you, and that record can limit you in a lot of ways. So them addressing that in the new bill, I feel like is something that people should be aware of and want to take advantage of. So community outreach, just really getting out there, touching places that have high stigmas, like your churches, your educational communities, things of that nature, I think are really, really important right now, getting to those communities that have low voter turnout rates. We have till October 18th to register to vote online. If COVID didn't do anything positive, it did make some things more convenient for people. So you have the opportunity to vote online. You have the opportunity to mail in your ballot. And if you forget to register to vote, you have the opportunity to register day of on November 8th when you go ahead and place your votes. So there are really no excuses to why question 4 shouldn't pass. It's all really up to the voters, and now it is in your hands. And as I stated before, this is a rare opportunity. Maryland is not very big on letting the voters decide on anything, so much less having this on the bill and having a supporting bill that really outlines what it's going to mean and how it's going to impact everyone.
And I guess my last question would be, we know that passing question 4 helps to continue the fight against the failed criminalization of cannabis, helps to provide the foundation for a very well-regulated market that's centered around equality, would help local entrepreneurs, small business owners potentially. What are some of the conversations, I think, around equity that people should keep in mind surrounding question 4? I mean, we briefly kind of touched on it at different answers to different questions about equity when it comes to criminal justice and making sure that the Black communities, brown communities that have been previously targeted consistently have found measures of justice if question 4 passes, and it helps to further that goal. But are there any other sorts of equity related issues that our patients should keep in mind when they go to vote? If not, that's okay. I just wanted to see if there was anything else besides some of those issues that are usually attached to question 4 that, either one of you could think of.
No, not really. Because from my understanding, the work group is coming up with the language that's going to then be implemented in the business and licensing structure. But when we talk about the decriminalization and those numbers, I think that when the General Assembly opens up for the 2023 session, we should be attacking those penalties head on, because some of them include some fines and some jail time that can still have that similar impact as if cannabis was not legal at all. I feel like if we're going to legalize it, let's make sure that the penalties associated with prohibition don't cross over into the legal market.
And to build on what you said, Losia, freeing cannabis prisoners is so important. And one of the things that Peake ReLeaf is doing is we're going to be releasing a shirt that all the proceeds from the sales of those shirts is going to go to the Last Prisoner Project. Because, if that's such an important piece. Nobody should still be in jail when the crime that they committed is no longer illegal. That's one of the initiatives that we're going to be rolling out here soon at Peake. Also, as you spoke about the work group, we won't know in terms of equity with the work group and then during the legislative session what the legislature is going to consider and what they're going to end up moving forward with. But during the next legislative session, that is when the structure of the cannabis industry, those legal commercial sales, is going to be determined, and legislators have their eye towards equity. There are many different things that many different states have done poorly and have done well that Maryland can take notes on in terms of making sure that equity measures that they put in place actually work rather than just presenting equity on paper. So that's a lot of the upcoming work after the passage of question 4, so long as we all get out there and vote for question 4. So once it passes, be watching out for those conversations, be watching what's happening in the legislature. It begins in January, it ends in April. Most of those conversations are going to be happening in those first 2 months, January and February. Things move really fast in the state legislature. So I would just encourage people to be paying attention to Maryland NORML and Losia and what they're doing. This is a very important legislative session, and the passage of question 4 is very important.
I saw those shirts. They were pretty awesome.
There's some amazing additional designs that are coming to help us kind of visually spread the message of the importance of not only voting for question 4, voting yes for question 4, but also how we can further how patients' rights are addressed and ensuring that patients are educated to know how they can affect the change that they want to see in the industry. So even with that, it seems like the benefits, you would think the benefits of legalizing cannabis here in Maryland are virtually endless. We've talked about everything from providing an economic boost through assisting small businesses to maybe potentially creating tens of thousands of jobs to addressing the failed prohibition and how that's impacted our communities. It just seems like there's really no reason to not vote yes for question 4. So is there anything else that you would share as a kind of a closing remark with our patient community to urge them to vote yes on question 4?
I do. Yes, absolutely. Question 4, the accompanying bill, House Bill 837, is not a perfect law. Nothing is perfect about this process. However, it is a process, and we take the necessary steps when afforded the opportunity. And right now is the biggest opportunity for us as Maryland residents that we can take in this process. But this is just the beginning. As Tracy said, we are entering into this upcoming General Assembly. We need your voices. We need your testimonies. We need your input as much as possible so that we can make these amendments to these laws so they can better meet the needs of Marylanders. This is just something that is a generic process right now, but we can fine tune it and make it more suitable for our communities by being involved, by being active. But it starts with this vote on November 8th. Get out there, vote yes on question 4.
Tracy, is there anything that you would also like to share as a closing remark for our patient community?
I think that Losia summed it up really well. I'll just reiterate, get out there, make sure you're registered to vote, go vote yes on 4.
Losia, thank you so much for sharing your time today and sharing your passion for just not only the industry, but for the community. There's a lot of people that I think profess to be advocates for the patient community, and you're really someone that has clearly had a track record of just doing the work and consistently doing the work and having a passion for just a furthering of what our patients' needs are and what this cannabis industry should be. So just thank you so much for all the work that you do, the tireless work that you do. You are very much appreciated. I just personally wanted you to know, but I know Tracy feels the same way, that you are just very much appreciated for all the work that you do.
I would be nowhere without you guys. Thank you so much for your support of the community and the patients, and not just being a business here for profits. You guys are definitely for the patients. Like, I wish there were more folks like you guys out there in the community, but Maryland is grateful to have you all.